First of all, there's a lot of energy in this room today. I've been involved in this party about since 2006 whenever I came here, and I've never seen this much energy before, and it amazes me. I am so happy to have three great candidates run for the U.S. Senate. I want to thank both Ed and Kevin. Ed was the one that really have kept me in this party after all these years and helped me out whenever I first ran for office, and without him I never would have ran for office. Kevin was the one that welcomed me into this party back when he was running as governor. He was state chair, he was secretary, I think he was newsletter publisher, he was doing all these things. And Kevin took the time to welcome me into this party. And it is just great to see how wonderful we've transformed in the past 8 years. And I want to thank these guys for that. Now the question was, why did I decide to run for Secretary of State? In 2012, I'd previously seen the current Secretary of State and the Republican Party try to keep our presidential candidate off of the ballot through dirty political tricks. Now we're seeing the same thing happen today in Ohio. Then shortly after moving back to Iowa from Nebraska, I registered to vote as a Libertarian. And of course my voter registration comes back as no party. And we're hearing reports that this has been happening now for 8 years. Even worse, the problem occurred under both a Democrat and a Republican Secretary of State. And despite spending $300,000 to find a couple of cases of voter fraud, the real voter fraud was right under their noses. They couldn't be bothered to fix it or admit there was a problem. So I decided we had to do something. We need to have someone who is independent of those two major parties to oversee our elections. Our elections are too important for the Democrats to oversee. They're too important for the Republicans to oversee. And they have not proven themselves responsible enough to administer the business functions of the office. So what would I do as Secretary of State? We have to look at what the Secretary of State actually does. As Rose points out, it sounds like a boring position, but it's actually one of the most important positions in the state of Iowa. The Secretary of State is responsible for overseeing all elections and business filings, as well as serving on the governor, the next governor of Iowa, Lee Heeb, Executive Council. The first thing I would do as Secretary of State would be to cut my salary in half to prove to the people of Iowa that I take spending your hard-earned tax dollars very seriously, and I can run an efficient and effective Secretary of State's office. A Porter administration would go aggressively after actual fraud without spending money like a drunken sailor, but the drunken sailors in this room remind me they spent their own money. The second thing I would do is work to make it easier to start a business in the state of Iowa. Currently you can file most business paperwork on the Secretary of State's website. The problem is you can't actually use a credit card. Now this is 2014. What business do you buy from that you cannot use a credit card? You have to actually call them up the next day with a credit card. That's ridiculous. Another thing we can allow is you should be able to file all your forms without having to seek an attorney. Most LLCs don't need an attorney to guide them over. They could fill out a form, they could put it in a document, they could electronically sign it, have their business started right there that same day. Instead, we have a process that forces Iowa business owners to spend hundreds of dollars on attorney fees, and that is insane. And we also need to realize that the Secretary of State's office is not to bring economic development into the office. They have to remain independent and fair. It's not to bring ideas such as E-Verify, where we have everyone that wants to hire someone to cut their lawn to go and verify that the person they're hiring to cut their lawn is an American citizen. E-Verify, I've worked as a business manager, and I can tell you that that system is inaccurate, ineffective, and it just wastes time. There was times whenever I managed a business, we had to wait 2 weeks on government paperwork just to get somebody hired when I needed them hired yesterday. The third and final thing I would do as Secretary of State would be to ask the next governor of Iowa, Lee Heeb, to reinstate the executive order allowing felons their voting rights restored when their time has been served and they have paid for their crime. Currently, Iowa is one of only 5 states that does not allow felons the right to vote after they have paid for their crime and served their time. And in the past 3 years, fewer than 50 out of 25,000 felons have had their voting rights restored. And that's not right. If you served your time and you pay for your crime and you want to be back in society, that is good. That means you care about Iowa. You care about America. And remember, the most important thing is if you want the Republicans to oversee our elections, I want you to vote Republican. And if you trust the Democrats to oversee our elections, I want you to vote Democrat. But if you want fair, honest elections, fair, honest business filings, you've got only one choice, and that is to vote for me, Jake Porter, Libertarian for Secretary of State. So I ask for your nomination. I ask that you consider volunteering and financially helping this historic campaign. This campaign got the voter registration issue fixed. We have already produced radio ads, TV ads. We're ready to go. We've produced direct mailings. All we need is your help to take this libertarian message across the great state of Iowa, where our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. Thank you.